It just kind of reminds me of why I thought this was such a special story when Pat talked to me about doing it. Let me start by thanking a few people, though. Yesterday, I was in West Des Moines at a Barnes & Noble, and I looked up, and my sisters and my brothers-in-law had driven all the way from Indiana to be there, and they're here today. So they drove 11 hours to be here. Just so you know, I have some Iowa credibility. My mother-in-law, Jean Carey, is here. Jean is from Ames, Iowa. And my wife, Julie, is also a native of Ames. So we come by the Iowa connections, quite honestly. I also want, there's so many people that came through that were helpful in the book itself, the research and everything, but nobody could have been more helpful than Pat Everly. As everyone knows, Pat is the real glue that keeps the program together. She is the enforcer, the cajoler, the sympathetic ear, and the one that will also give it to you straight. So it's just, I'd just like to give Pat a round of applause. My personal connection with the book was when our son Lee came out here to play, and so it's amazing to see Jill and Mike DeVoe here because they were his host parents. And they were just wonderful, wonderful people. He got, I think he got like a life internship when he came out here. He learned a lot about values. He learned a lot about people who would be kind to you, people who didn't expect anything in return and were just selfless about what they did. So that was really such a special experience. For him, really a transformative one. And I think that was the whole idea behind what Merle wanted to do. He wanted to change lives, and he wanted to change lives for the better. And certainly in our case, I know that was true. And so we really, we're always thankful to the people of Clarinda for that. Now, even though I live in Washington, D.C., I promise I'm going to be brief. I won't yak too long about this, but it's kind of interesting how these things come about because, Pat was very patient with this process and how everything played out, maybe more patient than I was, but you think it's a great story, and then you try to convince somebody else that it's a great story. So it started off great. Some fancy New York agent, somebody put me in touch with them, and they said, yeah, this sounds really terrific. Yeah, you'll have to do a fuller proposal, but it sounds great. So she gave it off to her hotshot associate. Yeah, this sounds really good. And about 4 months later, she said, I think I'm going to walk away from this project. So that was a little bit of a setback. So I went to another agent, and he read over everything, and he goes, can you just tell it through one season? Can you just tell the book through the story of Merle and Ozzie Smith? And I said, no, because I didn't think that would fully tell the story. I thought that would tell a story, but I didn't think it would tell the story of the Clarinda A's. So then things got better. Got another agent through an old friend of mine. He said, this guy will do a good job for you. So I talked to him, and he's with his wife, and he says, oh, we've got a little kid, he loves baseball, we love this story. So he kind of helps me along through the proposal process for a while. And then he says, very abruptly, I'm going to have to walk away from this project. You're going to, why don't you talk to this person or that person? And I thought, well, based on how you've handled this, I don't think I'm going to be taking your recommendation. But, I was pretty stubborn about this because I really believed in the power of the story. And so kept working on it, and I went straight to the publisher themselves. And John Meacham, who's the editor at Random House, said, well, I don't do sports books, but I have this colleague who does. So he looked at it, and then he said, look, I really like this. And I could tell he really read the proposal. And one nice thing about the delay was I kept working on the book. So the proposal kept getting fuller and fuller and richer and deeper to the point that the proposal itself now was 75 pages. So the guy says, I've got to ask you, why don't you have an agent? And I said, well, let me tell you why I don't have an agent. And he says, well, no, I think you have something here, and I really think you need an agent. So I said, okay, fine. Do you have one you'd recommend? And so he did, and he recommended the David Black Agency in New York, and I sent David Black the proposal. He said, I'm off this week. I've given it to my colleague, David Larabelle. We'll be back to you right away. They were back to me right away. They supported the project. They believed in it. They said, yes, let's go try to do this. And then when they went out into the marketplace, and that's where it's ruthless, because they don't, you know, you can tell them it's a nice story and they'll say that's fine, but we can't sell that book. And they were able to get 3 publishing houses interested in it. And luckily, Houghton Mifflin was the one that we ended up choosing. And they've been great throughout the process. You know, they just wanted to make it a little bit harder at the end, though, because I kept thinking, well, maybe you could do this at Christmas time, meaning last Christmas. Or maybe you could do it for opening day. And they said, no, this is about summer baseball, so we want to do it on July 5th. So that's where we ended up. And that's kind of the story behind the story about how the book came to be. The book, one of the challenges was trying to look at a story over the arc of 50 years or so, which is really when the A's program kind of began and how it's flourished. But I felt really good about the fact that every step along the way, another player or group of players told a different part of the story. And so I hope when you read that, that comes through. I mean, Ozzie Smith is clearly the most famous player to be in Clarinda, and rightly so. And I think the way that he has paid back his relationship with the A's over the years tells you both something about him, but also something about Clarinda and what a special place it is and how special the Eberly family is. But even though he's the most famous player, you can find a similar story talking to almost any player who passed through here. They talk about what a wonderful time it was. They talk about sending Mother's Day cards to those of you who have hosted players, or Father's Day cards, or Christmas cards. The wedding invitations have come. Chuck Knobloch sent a wedding invitation to Evelyn Hersberg, who was his host parent. And so it's both for the players and for the people of Clarinda, there's been this amazing synergy that has made it work. And it's made it work for a long time. And I certainly hope that it's something that you can sustain. And it's not easy. There's so much competition. There's so many competing claims for people's time. It's harder for people to host players now because everybody's lives seem to be busy. Not necessarily better, but busier. The players themselves are a little different. Some of them come up now and they're a little more pampered. Or their coach says, I don't want my star pitcher going to pitch in a summer league. I want him to stay right here. So it's tough to make it go, but I think when you step back and you realize, as Merle believed, that it's about more than baseball, then it doesn't really matter how many times they win and lose on the field. It really matters what does the game do for them in terms of themselves as people. And I hope that's what you get from the book when you read it. And I'm happy to take a couple questions if anybody has any, and then, you know, there is a game tonight, so I expect to see everybody there later today. But thank you very much. I'm honored to have done this, and I hope I've honored the story. So any questions? Oh, come on. Somebody has to have one. Pat will ask one. No kidding. Pat has all the answers. She doesn't have to have any other questions.
How long did it take you to actually write?
You know, the physical writing in the book, I mean, you know, I had a job, so I couldn't like devote every hour of every day to it. But I did have 1 month where it was very concentrated, and that helped me kind of get started. And once I did that, I kind of had the foundation for it. So I would think from start to finish, in my own mind, maybe 1.5 years, something like that. And then the editing process takes quite a while, and then they have editing beyond that, like copy editing. And so even with all those people and even with the eagle eyes I had reading it, the early proof copy still had typos in it. And I was like, oh gosh, that's terrible. And there's probably one or two that's still in there, so my apologies for that. If there are any mistakes in the book, it's my fault, so I take ownership of those. I hope there aren't too many. But it was a fun process, actually, because the more people you talk to, the story just built. Yeah.
Are you gonna send Kevin Costner a copy?
Funny you should say that. You know, all the tough assignments go to Pat. And you won't be surprised to know that somehow Pat has a connection to him. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Chuck Offenberger, it was great. He wrote a column today about the book because we had a little conversation yesterday. And he said, you know, I like this as movie written all over it. And we in Iowa know our baseball movies. So, you know, we'll see. Who knows? But if that's it, I'm happy to sign books. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Do you have any idea how many former players you've interviewed or talked to?
I think overall, if you count the people in the town and players, there was more than 100 interviews in all. And, you know, there were some people I had trouble reaching, but not too many. I had trouble getting Chuck Knobloch for a while, but then I finally got him, and he was very gracious, great to talk to. You know, had very fond memories of playing here. And the funny thing is, I mean, every one of these players has fond memories of Pat Eberly. So Pat was sort of like the doorkeeper. If Pat said, you should talk to this guy, then they would do it. And so that really helped. That opened a lot of doors, for sure. Anybody else? Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. As I say, this was a true honor to be part of this, and you know, to be maybe an honorary member of the Clarinda community. That's what I hope. And I'll stay and sign as long as you guys would like. Thank you again.